Hello students, your librarian here. Welcome. Today I'm here to talk to you about grief, and in particular, we will discuss 3 reads that deal with the repercussions of grief and loss in our main characters' lives. Yes, I know, depressing topic, but let's be honest, grief is part of the human experience. Queen Elizabeth said, "Grief is the price we pay for love." This is the beauty of grief. We must first love in order to experience the pain of loss. So let's ask ourselves, what can be gained from grief and loss? Is it the strength to know you can overcome? Does it encourage us to find community and solace with others? Does it help us find ourselves in the journey through life we need to take? Let's explore 3 books that deal with grief and its repercussions, but in quite different ways. Imagine this night. Neighborhood party, everyone hanging out, shots ring out, and 2 teenage friends take off in a car. Then, blue lights, officer comes to car, friend steps out, there's too much movement, emotions are too high, 3 shots, blood leaving from a young man's body, and Star's life and that of the entire Garden Heights community will never be the same. If this sounds interesting, then Angie Thomas's The Hate U Give might just be the book for you. The main character, Star, struggles with her own identity. She is a black female from an impoverished neighborhood that attends a prestigious, predominantly white high school. Her father was a former gang member who spent 3 years in prison and now owns a grocery store. Her mother, Lisa, is a nurse. Her family is loving and supportive. She has a white, rich boyfriend named Chris and friends from both sides of the tracks. She often questions whether or not she should act black or act white instead of knowing how to just be Star. She has experienced grief in the past with the death of her childhood friend Natasha in a drive-by. However, when her unarmed friend Khalil is shot 3 times by a police officer, she must deal with the shock, confusion, anger, and grief that his unjust death causes. But she isn't the only one. Riots spark across the Garden Heights community, and Star finds herself at the center as the key witness to her friend's shooting. As Star struggles to understand the situation she is in, questions are raised as to why systematic racial prejudice exists and what she needs to do to not only bring justice to her friend, but inspire change in the entire system. Through her grief and her anger, she finds her voice and transforms into an activist. This book was inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement, and it touches on some heavy but relevant and important topics, such as the acceptance of interracial relationships, gang activity, the dehumanization of minorities, the cycle of poverty, white privilege, and systematic racism. If you are interested in a book that is honest, raw, and emotional, this is the book for you. If you want a book that speaks a powerful message and takes you on a journey that makes you question not only yourself but the world you live in, this is the book for you. If you see injustice and you don't yet know how to find your voice, Angie Thomas's The Hate U Give is the book for you. Rape, murder, dismemberment, killer never found. Let me ask you, what do you think it takes to become a serial killer? Where does the darkness come from? How do you learn to speak the language of violence? Do you think there is ever a time to kill? Our next selection in our exploration of grief and its repercussions is Mindy McGinnis's The Female of the Species. Taking place in a small rural town, the novel is told from the perspective of 3 high school seniors, PK, Jack, and Alex. PK is short for preacher's kid, and she is constantly fighting against the stereotype her dad's job puts on her. She parties a little hard, speaks a little vulgar, and discusses her own sexual activity. She has been broken up with by her boyfriend, who left her for Brantley, the high school beautiful mean girl. She works as a volunteer at the veterinary clinic. Next, we have Jack, the popular, smart, good-looking teenage jock who recognizes the need for more but is caught in the trappings of typical boy behavior and locker room talk. He frivolously hooks up with girls, one being Brantley, and likes to party pretty hard. And last, we have Alex, a total loner who spends so little time around others that she speaks differently than the rest of her peers. Her mother is an alcoholic, and they are both dealing with and grieving with the rape and murder of her sister Anna 3 years ago. Alex knows when everyone looks at her, all they see is her sister, her grief, their pity. But there is another thing that separates Alex from the rest. She is a serial killer. When the story begins, Alex explains how she can kill someone, and not just anyone, but the murderer of her sister. Her sister's killer had gone free from the law, but not from Alex. She studied him, watched his behavior, learned his tics, his weaknesses, and then she made her move, finding that killing was surprisingly easy. But the question is whether it is easy because he was the murderer of her sister, because of her grief, or does she truly have darkness in her? As the story unfolds, Alex becomes less of a loner. She makes friends with PK through volunteering at the veterinary clinic. She starts attending parties with her classmates, and then she connects with Jack, and the relationship that blooms is both beautiful and doomed from the start. What makes this book absolutely amazing is its intelligent commentary on the pervasiveness of rape culture and the abundance of girl-on-girl hate. Alex helps PK to redirect her anger at Brantley for stealing her boyfriend and instead place the blame where it is due, her boyfriend. She stops PK from getting in a physical altercation with Brantley and says that the reality of violence is much more intense than most people can handle. This book takes behaviors that are common, such as a boy making sexual movements with a basketball in the gym without getting in trouble, and shows how these behaviors can lead to acceptance of sexual violence. Alex's grief and anger over her sister's death lead her to a place of darkness that she can't quite leave, but through friendships and love, she does find happiness in the world around her. With cunning observation, quick wit and humor, and honest and raw emotion, this book makes the reader question previous assumptions, gender norms, and the way in which society perpetuates sexual violence. This is definitely a read you should pick up, and once you do, you are not going to want to put this one down. Minnie McGinnis's The Female of the Species is exciting, raw, darkly humorous, and quite intelligent. Our final book in our exploration of grief and its repercussions is Patrick Ness's A Monster Calls. This book will most definitely pull at your heartstrings, and let me warn you, you will need to make sure you have plenty of tissue around. This is a quick read, but one that will take you on an emotional journey that will leave you in tears. It is haunting, beautiful, and truly a literary masterpiece. This book is about grief, loss, and the pain from this. While it will not leave you happy, it is important. In the book, nobody says the C word. It's almost as if they believe if they say the word cancer, if they talk about it, it makes it real, it makes death imminent, it makes treatment ineffective. In fact, Connor is angry at his only friend Lily because she told everyone about his mom's sickness, and now he is the boy with a mom who is sick. So nobody talks about cancer, chemotherapy, death, but instead uses words like sick, not feeling well, and treatment. But Connor knows deep down his mom is not getting better, especially when his grandmother starts to take care of him and his dad returns from America for a visit. The setting of the story definitely reflects the mood, taking place in a small rural town in England where 12-year-old Connor's house overlooks a church, a yew tree, and a graveyard. Connor is plagued by the same reoccurring nightmare, waking up repeatedly at 12:07. However, one night when Connor awakes, he finds that the yew tree has transformed into a terrifying monster. But Connor is not afraid. There is a bigger monster lying in wake. The yew monster informs Connor that he will tell 3 stories, and that on the last night Connor must share his truth. But Connor doesn't want to. It is the truth that he does not want to face. He does not want to talk about his nightmare. So the monster begins to share his stories with Connor, and in them Connor finds that people are not all good or all bad. There are gray areas. For example, in the monster's first tale, he tells the story of a witch, a prince, and a farm girl. The witch was the prince's stepmother and wanted to remain in power, so she thought the best way to do so was to marry the prince. The prince had fallen in love with a beautiful and smart farm girl, so he refused, ran away with the girl, and promised to return to overthrow the queen. Yet when they run away, the farm girl is murdered in her sleep, and the prince awakens covered in blood. He yells that the queen has murdered his bride, and the villagers storm the queen's castle. In the book, Connor is happy, but the monster tells him the story is not yet complete. He goes on to share that when the villagers went to burn the witch alive, he saved her and allowed her to live out her days. Connor becomes angry and questions the monster. The monster responds by saying, "I never said she killed the farmer's daughter. I only said that the prince said it was so." Connor finds out that the prince murdered his bride for the good of the kingdom, and in his grief makes himself believe his own lie. As Connor listens to the monster's tale, he finds himself acting out the stories in reality. The monster forces Connor to explore truth and face what he denies. Grief can force you to deny truth. It can make you so angry you can't think straight, and sometimes it's okay to let it go. Told through the eyes of 12-year-old Connor, this book forces you to understand the depths of grief, denial, love, and acceptance. This is a beautiful story and perfect for our exploration of the repercussions of grief and the self-discovery that can occur from loss. If you are going to read any book on grief and loss, Patrick Ness's A Monster Calls is the one for you. So to recap our books about loss, grief, and its repercussions, we have Angie Thomas's The Hate You Give, Mindy McGinnis's The Female of the Species, and Patrick Ness's A Monster Calls. Again, I know grief is a heavy topic, but it is one that unites the whole of mankind. We will all experience loss. No one can escape death, but we must ask ourselves, what can loss teach us? How does it transform us? Does it give us strength? I hope you take some time to read and explore how grief and loss can lead to self-discovery and power. I hope Star, Alex, and Connor can show you how grief is something we will all experience and there are lessons to be learned. You will see how through the unjust death of her friend and the hate you give, Star finds her voice and learns that she can make a difference in the world around her. And after the rape and murder of her sister and the female of the species, Alex refuses to accept the prevalence of sexual violence and helps her peers recognize how their own behaviors shape a rape culture in their high school. And lastly, how finally accepting the truth of his mom's cancer and her eventual death in A Monster Calls, Connor is finally able to let go and say goodbye. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you come down to check these out. I look forward to discussing more great reads with you soon.